He said it was just a massage. I remember the way he said it, calm, casual, like he was offering me a glass of water. But something in his eyes, it wasn't casual at all. Maybe I'm imagining that now. Maybe I want to believe I saw it then because part of me wanted to see it. We were alone in his apartment. Soft amber light filtered through the linen curtains, and the air felt like it had been holding its breath for too long. I'd been holding mine for even longer. "It'll help," he said, watching me with that low, steady gaze. "You carry too much tension. I can feel it just being near you." I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. My body was tight. Like every emotion I'd swallowed over the last year had found a corner in my shoulders to live in. He was a friend. A safe space. At least that's what I told myself. And I was tired. Not just in the usual way, but in that quiet, aching way you can't explain. Like the skin on your soul has gone thin. So I said yes. I said yes because I miss being touched without expectation. I said yes because my body was still young, but I felt so old inside. I said yes because something in me needed to feel again, anything, even if it was a bad idea dressed in soft intentions. He told me to lie on my stomach. I heard him move behind me, fingers opening a bottle, the slow glide of oil in his palms. I stared at the floor beneath the couch, and something inside me shifted. This wasn't a massage table. This wasn't a spa. This was his living room, his couch, his breath, his silence, and my heart already starting to forget how to behave. He started at my neck, thumbs firm, patient. No rush. Just the quiet rhythm of pressure and release. And for a moment it was just that, healing. Honest. Human. But then his hands found the small of my back. And lingered. Not inappropriate. Not really. But longer than needed. Slower than normal. And suddenly, I wasn't sure if the line was behind us or just ahead. All I knew was I didn't ask him to stop. And I didn't want to. I told myself to relax. That was the whole point, wasn't it? But the way his hands moved, confident, sure, always just on the edge of too much, it made relaxing impossible. It wasn't about what he touched. It was about how. His fingertips traced the curves of my back like he was remembering something he was never supposed to know. There was no music playing. Just the hush of evening and the sound of my own breath, betraying me with every shaky exhale. "You okay?" he asked softly, voice low, warm, close. I nodded, but the truth was, I didn't know. Something had shifted between us. Not in words, but in the way the air carried our silence now. It was heavier. Hungrier. He moved down to my lower back, pausing there. His thumbs pressed slow circles into my hips, not crossing any boundary, not technically, but close enough that my whole body tensed like it might. That tension wasn't fear. It was anticipation. It was the space where curiosity becomes temptation. I could have said something. Shifted. Pulled away. But instead, I let the silence answer for me. I let him keep going. Because somewhere deep inside, I wanted to know what it felt like to be wanted like this, quietly, wordlessly, without permission but also without pressure. Like he was waiting for me to open the door, even as his hands pressed gently against it. And maybe I was. But the guilt had already started to whisper. He was my friend. I wasn't supposed to want this. But when he leaned in slightly, and I felt his breath warm against my neck, my body didn't care. It leaned back. It listened. And in that moment I realized I hadn't been touched in a long, long time. At least not like this. Not like I mattered. His hands paused again just below my waist, before slowly lifting away. The absence made my skin ache. I heard him shift behind me, his breath catching slightly, and I realized he was fighting something too. A line. A rule. Maybe his own better judgment. But then he spoke. "I know where not to touch," he said quietly. His voice didn't sound smug or teasing. It sounded careful. Like he was naming something dangerous but beautiful. And somehow that was worse. Because it made me feel known. Like he'd studied me long enough to understand not just my body, but the ghosts I carried in it. He moved back to my shoulders, kneading slow and steady, giving me space I hadn't asked for, but maybe needed. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said. Where not to touch. It echoed in my mind like a dare. I wasn't naive. I knew what was happening here. The restraint in his hands only made the pull between us more intimate, more unbearable. It wasn't lust exactly. It was something deeper. loneliness speaking the only language it remembered. He brushed a loose strand of hair from my neck. Not necessary. Not professional. But gentle. So gentle. I felt my breath catch in my throat. You don't have to keep going, I whispered. He hesitated. I could feel it in the air. I want to, he said. And God help me, so did I. So I turned over. Slowly. Carefully. And when our eyes met, me lying there vulnerable, him still kneeling beside me, something inside both of us cracked open. He didn't touch me again. Not right away. But the look in his eyes did more than any hand ever could. It told me he'd been waiting. Not for my body. For my permission. And maybe, without saying it, I had just given it. Lying there, facing him, I realized how much more exposed I felt now. Not because of my body. He hadn't even looked down. But because of my face. My eyes. The part of me that still held back. He sat there, still as stone, just watching me. His hands rested on his knees like he didn't trust them anymore. Neither of us spoke. And yet it was the loudest silence I'd ever felt. The light in the room was soft, golden. The kind of light that hides nothing. The kind that wraps around two people and dares them to admit what they've been pretending not to feel. I could hear my own breathing, shallow, uneven. His was steadier, but not by much. I shouldn't have said that, he murmured finally. Which part? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. His gaze flicked across my face, pausing at my mouth. The part where I told you I knew where not to touch. My chest tightened. Because the truth was, he did know. He knew where not to touch. And he was avoiding it with such brutal care that it made everything else feel louder. The brush of his fingers earlier. The heat that still lived where his hands had been. Even now, his restraint was a kind of intimacy I hadn't expected. Like he was holding every second hostage until I wanted more. You didn't cross a line, I said, though part of me wished he had. His smile was soft. Sad even. I think that's what's making this harder. And that's when I realized we weren't just navigating desire. We were navigating everything that came with it. Friendship, guilt, timing, the years we hadn't looked at each other like this but maybe always could have. I don't know what this is, I admitted. You don't have to, he said gently. But I know what it feels like. I swallowed hard. And what does it feel like? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out, slowly, like he was afraid I might flinch, and placed his hand over mine. Not possessive. Not demanding. Just there. And in that small, trembling moment, it felt like everything I'd been pretending I didn't want. His hand on mine wasn't bold. It wasn't even particularly brave. But it felt like the most intimate thing that had happened to me in years. Because it wasn't about his fingers. It was about his intention. He wasn't trying to take. He wasn't trying to lead me anywhere. He was just present. Completely. I turned my palm under his, our skin sliding together with a kind of fragile friction. Felt like permission. Or maybe surrender. Neither of us spoke. There was no need to. Every breath, every heartbeat, every inch of air between us had turned electric. He shifted closer, just enough for me to feel the warmth of him. Not touching, almost. And that almost, it undid me. Because it gave me a choice. To lean in. To pull away. To pretend nothing was happening. Or to finally admit that something had been happening for a long, long time. He raised his hand, and for a second I thought he might cup my cheek. But he didn't. Instead, he hovered, just inches from my face, his fingers trembling in the hush between us. Waiting. Like even now, he needed me to decide. So I closed my eyes and leaned in. Not far. Just enough. Enough to let my forehead rest against his. Our skin barely touched, but the sensation bloomed like fire in my chest. His breath met mine, hot, uneven, reverent. We stayed like that. Not kissing. Not speaking. Just breathing together in a moment too full to break. I could feel the restraint in him, the way every muscle held itself back, every instinct softened by something more tender than desire. And that's when I knew. He wasn't holding back because he didn't want me. He was holding back because he did. In a way that had nothing to do with lust and everything to do with care. And God, I had forgotten what that felt like. To be wanted gently. To be held in silence and still heard completely. I don't know how long we stayed there. Forehead to forehead, sharing nothing but breath. But time felt irrelevant. He hadn't kissed me. And yet, I already felt kissed. Not on the mouth, but somewhere deeper. The part of me that had been untouched for too long. Not physically, but emotionally. And maybe that's what made it so dangerous. Because it wasn't the kind of closeness you could undo. I've wanted this, he whispered finally. But not like this. Not unless you. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I could feel the ache in his pause. And my answer came, not in words but in the way I turned my face slightly, letting the tip of my nose graze his. That small movement, it broke him. His hands cupped my face like I was fragile glass. And still he didn't kiss me. Not right away. His thumbs traced the edge of my jaw, slow and reverent. Like he was memorizing it. Like he knew that if this moment ever ended, he'd need a map back to it. The air between our lips was thick, heavy, trembling. And I was trembling too. Not from fear. From finally. When his lips finally brushed mine, it wasn't a kiss. Not really. It was a question. And my mouth answered before my mind could even form the words. I kissed him back. Soft. Slow. No hunger, just heat. No urgency, just ache. It wasn't about claiming. It was about being allowed. His hand moved to my waist, and my body answered without thought, arching slightly instinctively. And still he was careful. So careful. As if every movement asked, "Are you sure?" And mine whispered back, "I've never been more sure of anything that made so little sense." But even in that closeness, guilt stirred quietly in the background. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was a friend. A safe space. And now I was letting the walls fall. Letting something in I might not be able to walk away from unchanged. But in his arms that fear felt small. Because his touch never demanded. It only invited. And I had already stepped inside. His lips were still on mine, but it wasn't just a kiss anymore. It was a pull. A slow unraveling of everything I'd kept tied too tightly for too long. He kissed like he didn't need to win me, just hold me. Like he understood I was fighting myself more than him. And somehow he was willing to wait for both of us. When we finally parted, his forehead rested against mine again. He was breathing harder now. So was I. But he still didn't move to take more. He just stayed. Still. Present. Grounded. Like if he moved too fast, he might break whatever spell had brought us here. And maybe he was right. Because under the softness, I was starting to unravel. "You okay?" he asked gently, his thumb brushing the corner of my mouth like he already missed the kiss. I nodded, but my throat felt tight. "I don't know what this means." His eyes searched mine. "It doesn't have to mean anything yet." But we both knew that wasn't true. It already meant something. It meant I couldn't pretend we were just friends anymore. It meant the safe space we had, whatever that was, had shifted. And I didn't know if we could ever go back. He lay beside me then, slowly, carefully. Not pulling me in. Just letting his presence speak for him. I turned toward him. And for a long time we didn't talk. We just traced each other with our eyes, our fingertips, our breath. He tucked a piece of hair behind my ear. Then let his fingers drift down my arm, trailing heat in their wake. I let my hand find his chest. The steady thrum of his heartbeat beneath my palm made my own heart ache. He wasn't perfect. But in that moment he felt like the only thing real. And I knew I was at a threshold. Not of sex. Of surrender. To trust. To risk. To wanting something more than safety. He leaned in again, kissing my shoulder this time. Barely a touch, but enough to make me feel everything. Every part of me wanted to follow that kiss into something deeper. But I was afraid. Not of him. Of myself. Because once this happened, once I let it, there'd be no way to unfeel it. And no way to pretend I hadn't wanted it all along. He didn't ask for more. He never did. But his presence, his hands, the way he looked at me like I was already something sacred, that asked everything. Not with words. Not even with touch. But in the way his breath slowed when I shifted closer. In the way his hand, warm and open, settled gently at the curve of my waist. As if it had always known its way there, but never dared to arrive until now. I rested my forehead against his again. We were tangled but not desperate. Pressed close but not rushed. His nose brushed the edge of my cheek, and I felt the hesitation, beautiful, brutal hesitation, before he kissed me again. Deeper this time. Not just lips. Not just skin, but the kind of kiss that knows what you're afraid to say out loud. The kind that touches the past and the future at once. My body moved with his slowly, instinctively. There were no decisions now. Only moments. Whispers. Breath. His hand slid over my side and I arched into it. Not because I had to, but because I needed to feel that warmth. The ache wasn't just physical. It was emotional. A release of every time I'd swallowed desire. Every time I told myself I didn't need to be seen. He saw me. Every stuttered breath. Every shiver. And still, he touched me like I was something holy. We moved together like we were writing a language only we could read. No rush. No destination. Just tension rising and falling like the breath between us. And somewhere in all that stillness, something inside me finally let go. Not of fear, but of permission. To want. To feel. To let something matter. When we lay there afterward, clothes not gone but shifted just enough, I wasn't afraid. I was awake. He held me like the moment was delicate. Like it meant something. And it did. It meant everything. Because no matter what came next, no matter what we were, we had crossed into a truth that couldn't be undone. I didn't feel guilty. I felt alive. Somewhere between silence and breath. His hands taught me something I'd forgotten. Desire isn't always about wanting more. Sometimes it's about finally allowing what was already there. All along,